So for your warm-up today, you should have found holes, vertical asymptotes, and horizontal asymptotes. So this is like the last few tries we went over yesterday. And of course your homework. So first of all, horizontal asymptotes are where we're going to start because you don't need to factor to find them. So in the first one, we have a degree of 1 and a degree of 2. Well, when the degree on the bottom is bigger, that was case number 2, and you always have a horizontal asymptote of y equals 0. So there's answer number 1. Now to find holes in vertical asymptotes, we have to factor. So I'm going to rewrite the problem and look at which part or parts I can factor. The top part, x minus 3, that's already factored. I look at the denominator, I can factor because there's an x squared there. So I'm looking for factors of 1 times 3, and they have to add up to negative 4. Well, since they have to multiply to a positive but add to a negative, that means I'm going to need two negatives here, and the only factors of 3 are 3 and 1. So negative 3 times negative 1. So my numerator is x minus 3 still. My denominator becomes x minus 3 and x minus 1. Remember, when finding holes in vertical asymptotes, we only care about setting the denominator equal to 0. So the denominator, x minus 3 equals 0, and x minus 1 equals 0. So I have x equals 3 and x equals 1. And now I need to determine, are those holes or are those asymptotes? Well, we look to see if something can cancel. And when I look back at the problem, I can see that x minus 3 and x minus 3 would cancel, which means that one's a hole. Since the other one wouldn't cancel, that's a vertical asymptote. And those are the other two answers for number 1. Number 2, again, start with your horizontals because you don't have to factor those. So the highest degree on top is a 2, so is it on the bottom. Well, when the degrees are the same, that was case number 1, and you divide their leading coefficients. Well, the leading coefficient of that x squared is a 1, so is it on the bottom, and 1 over 1 is just 1. So this one has horizontal asymptote of y equals 1. Now we move on to the factoring to determine holes in vertical asymptotes. So we go 1 times negative 2, which is negative 2, and it has to add up to negative 1. Well, the only factors of 2 are 2 and 1. One of them has to be negative, and since the 1 is negative, it's negative 2 times 1. So my numerator becomes x minus 2 and x plus 1. For the bottom one, we have 1 times 20, which is 20. And this time the factors have to add up to 9. Hopefully you figured out 4 and 5. So my denominator becomes x plus 4 and x plus 5. Remember, with holes in vertical asymptotes, we only care about the denominator. So x plus 4 equals 0, x plus 5 equals 0. So x equals negative 4, and x equals negative 5. Now we have to determine, are those holes or vertical asymptotes? Well, if I look at my numerator and denominator, nothing has an x minus 2 on the bottom or an x plus 1. You can't cancel out x plus 4 and x plus 5 with anything on top, so that makes these both vertical asymptotes. Here are your 4 problems from homework last night: horizontals, verticals, and the last one had a hole with it. So go ahead and check these and then unpause this when you're done checking. Here's your practice on your vertical asymptotes and holes. This is an extremely important section. If you can do this, the rest of the chapter falls into place. So get help from each other as needed. There are hard copies of this if you need it, but these are your 13 problems. If you don't finish in class, then you have homework tonight.